It's worth going over once again the news that we're discussing today, because we have had this report from the Financial Ombudsman Service, and it's worth just looking again at the numbers about the extent of debanking in this country. So let's have a look at them. The Financial Ombudsman Service has reported today a sharp rise in the number of complaints, as Nigel rightly says, from businesses about their bank accounts being frozen or closed down. 3,900 firms have raised concerns about those frozen and closed accounts this year. That's up from 2,700 over the previous year. That's 44% increase, and 36% of claimants' complaints were upheld over the last year, compared to just 30% of a much smaller number the year before. Look, this is a national scandal. I don't know why this is being allowed to happen, because if you are a high street bank, you have what's called a universal service obligation. You are meant to provide a bank account to anyone who wants one, as long as they've got a fixed address. And yet we learned during the Coutts NatWest scandal, NatWest of course owns the rather pucker flashy bank Coutts, where Nigel had an account with respect, and then he was debanked. Nigel did a subject access request, of course, and it turned out that Coutts had been writing memos how they didn't like Nigel's politics, so they thought they would debank him. And of course, the chief executive of NatWest had to resign. And what we've seen now, because of that story, which very much played out on GB News, of course, you've had lots of firms complaining that they're being debanked too. But the real issue is for individuals who feel they're being debanked, not least because the banks are really now abandoning, in many places, the UK high street. And if you can't get a bank account, it's very difficult to exist in the modern world. You know, try parking your car without a smartphone and an app, and then try paying for that parking on the app, unless you've got a bank account.
Liam, does this have anything to do with ESG, environment, social and governance?
I think it may be partly that. I think there are many pretexts that banks are using to debank people, as we learned in the Nigel Farage case. That was a straight, undeniable case of bureaucrats in a bank not liking the politics of somebody who stood in multiple national elections and, of course, was an MEP for many years and who led parties, two separate parties, who won two national elections. I'm talking, of course, about Nigel Farage, and yet they didn't like his politics, so they debanked him. And I think other people will feel that their firms are being debanked because maybe they don't comply with certain attitudes when it comes to environmental, social and governance issues, the ESG agenda, which you just mentioned, which of course is very powerful now across many boardrooms in the UK. People are petrified to not comply with it. This is very much part of the culture wars. But look, banks want to get rid of accounts that they don't think are profitable. Banks want to get rid of branches because branches are expensive. Banks want to be completely online because that's cheaper and easier for them, and they don't want to deal with the small fry. They don't want to deal with ordinary people with not very much money or small firms with not very much money. But that is why, for centuries in this country, if you've had a banking licence, you have a universal obligation. A banking licence is literally a licence to print money. And the quid pro quo of that, the bargain, if you like, is that you must then, as the bank, provide bank accounts to those who, even if they're not very commercially interesting to you. Our financial services sector, the tech giant sector, is now so powerful that they're pushing away that universal services obligation. And quite frankly, as a long-term observer of these trends, I'm pretty confused as to why the regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority and others aren't reinforcing this universal service obligation and telling the banks, look, you have to provide bank accounts to these firms and to ordinary people, even when you don't want to.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really stark set of figures out. 88%, that rise of complaints from businesses following this scandal that was covered, of course, heavily on GB News. I hope that perhaps we've begun to lift the lid here on something that is going across our banking sector. But Liam Halligan, thank you very much.